welcome back to another episode of Sage Advice. Should you look to buy
God of War?
PlayStation has the new God of War coming out. Recently, we just got the new story trailer that's going to be playing as we're having our discussion here, and then we'll go into some of the gameplay trailer stuff as we're talking. But Sage and I want to talk about some of our concerns and whether this is something that you should be looking to buy or not. And we're really torn up about this. We are hopefully excited for it, anticipating it as a great thing because the God of War franchise is huge, but there's a lot to discuss in whether this is going to be a great game or not.
So yeah, just let's take a step back and kind of brief overview of the God of War series. It follows Kratos because this might actually be some people's first God of War.
True.
You know, because it started back on the PlayStation 2. It's kind of a long-running franchise. So you follow Kratos. He's, you know, a Spartan. Ends up dead family. Decides to curb stomp Ares, God of War. Hence the name God of War. Kratos becomes the new God of War and hacks his way through the rest of the Greek pantheon, and that's kind of where the third one ends. So now we're kind of a few years beyond that, probably close to a decade even. Kratos is in a new land. The Greek setting is gone. It looks like they're going with a, Norse mythology now, which I think if you're jumping off from Greek, Norse is probably the next best option you could go with.
And that's the first point of contention of positives and negatives to look at. Is when you're watching these gameplay trailers and story trailers here as we're talking, you can see a lot of runes that point towards Norse mythology, and it's definitely going that route. And so my concern, I'll play devil's advocate on this first one. My concern is this just going to be God of War now with Norse gods instead of, the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, instead of stomping Zeus and Hades, are we going through Thor and Odin?
And then how much of a change is that when we just switch out the pantheon, quote unquote, that we're going after? The story trailer does show us that the wife has died, the mother of the child, that we'll get to that whole thing later, has died, and they're taking her ashes up to be to the highest point in the realm, whatever that is, and that embarks this epic adventure. And it looks like it's going to be a great adventure, but is it going to be just a switch and bait of one set of gods for another set of gods? And hopefully, I'm totally wrong about that when I play devil's advocate. Hear me out. I really don't hope that is the case. I really hope that it's not. But that could be a determinant factor on whether the game is great or just eh.
Well, and I think they tried to address that a little bit in this story trailer, because Kratos does mention the consequences of killing a god.
Yep.
As if, he's kind of learned from his past, maybe. And hopefully, you're not just going to second verse, same as the first this one.
Which, if that is the case, that leads to the next point of contention, which is God of War 2 and 3 really did not develop Kratos as a character. It was just rage, stomp, kill. Okay? Whereas God of War 1 introduced why he had this motivation with his family being killed. Now in this new one, we see him say to his son, killing a god has some consequences. And the son's like, well, how do you know? And he almost want to... It's funny, Kratos, this moment where he's like, oh, trust me, kid. I know full well.
Kratos, have you given your son the talk?
Exactly. And so we see this moment where we see some character development for Kratos, and that could be a huge positive reason that this game is going to be amazing, to see Kratos develop as a character, to hold back a little bit more, to not be diving in out of rage, but having a purpose, and that could make the game a real positive.
But with me playing devil's advocate here, is this going to affect gameplay? God of War has always been hard-pumping, kinetic action. And are we dialing what was up to 11 down to like a 5 at this point? Really toning back God of War from, I'm going to, impale this Hydra on a boat to, got an axe.
Yeah, because it feels like when we watch these story trailers and stuff, especially the new story trailer that came out, is God of War is the thing that everyone quotes. When a new action game comes out, they go, oh, it's a God of War clone. God of War clone. This is a God of War clone. Like, that's what it's called for. That is what it's held up to as the standard within the IP and the franchise, is that other games get compared to you. And so if you're that high up, as fans, should we worry that we're trading this kinetic, high-speed action, just bloodthirsty, rampaging action for a story-driven, cinematic-themed game. And yes, you can change how a franchise goes. Look at Resident Evil 3 to Resident Evil 4. You can totally rearrange a franchise. It's difficult and it's risky, but sometimes you have to breathe new life into it. So maybe God of War is at this point. But going back again, could this also take away from the very thing that fans love about God of War?
Yeah, and I do think they have to walk a fine line here. On the one hand, as our first point brought up, we don't just want to go around killing off another pantheon, you know. We already have God of War 1 through 3. We don't need a repeat of that. But at the same time, you depart too far from that and do it the wrong way, and then it's not God of War anymore.
So this game essentially has to walk a very fine line between being something new that pushes the franchise somewhere else and not just killing another pantheon and switching out one set of gods for another, but at the same time keeping that high kinetic, octane, energy-packed, just mayhem that is God of War, that other people compare almost every game to. And if you want an example of a franchise not doing this well, look no further than DMC versus Devil May Cry.
Yeah, the gameplay of DMC was actually top-notch. It was a little more forgiving than its predecessors, but it played well. The problem was they decided to depart so far from Dante and all the stuff that was built prior that it almost felt insulting to anyone who was a fan of Devil May Cry.
And that's the concern here. We see Kratos grow, but will he grow so much that he no longer holds on to what makes Kratos Kratos? Which, again, it's this fine line. I just bashed number 2 and 3 for not having character development, and we want character development, but we don't want to fly so far in the opposite direction. And the game, like I already said earlier, really has to walk a fine line here. And then we get to my ultimate concern with this game.
Okay, so here we go. Anyone who's followed this game so far will have noticed Kratos' son. And from the looks of it, unless they're pulling a bait and switch and they kill him off, which I don't see that at this point. I know that was the early speculation. But the thing is, it's looking like this is an escort quest.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to kill the boy off, because when we watch the story trailer, we see that line about, this is him, having this issue with who he is and his nature and your nature, Kratos, and we hear this female narrator say that to them. So obviously that's going to play a huge mechanic. So not only could it be a giant escort quest where you constantly got to take care of the boy, and no one in gaming history has ever said out loud, I love me an escort quest.
But we have seen in the past that an escort quest game can do well. Case in point, The Last of Us.
Yeah, an amazing game, huge on the reviews, huge on its gameplay, just everyone's looking forward to The Last of Us 2. We're looking forward to doing an episode on that later too, but that's for another time. It can work. My other concern with it working though is the boy as a character. How does he interact with Kratos? So far in the story trailer, I was honestly, and somebody might not like me for saying this, I was very turned away from the character of the boy. Well, how would you know? You're next. I'm gonna kill you. He sounds very, and he is that age, but he sounds like a whiny teenager, and I don't want to deal with that through my God of War game.
Yeah, teen angst. It makes sense for the character from what we can tell, but at the same time, just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's a good idea.
And so can you imagine escort questing, this just yelling at you, constantly questioning everything you do, teenager, through your God of War game?
And who knows, that might actually be something that starts to come about later. They might endear you to Kratos' son early on, to where you can start to understand how he's going through this. We don't know at this point.
Last point of contention that I want to give, and you can't stay with one thing all the way through, is some gameplay mechanics. The axe in both the story trailer and the gameplay trailer seems to be the main weapon.
Yeah.
For Kratos to be using. The son uses a bow and an arrow, and there might be some game mechanics where you have to shoot with him, or the boy's got you covered while you're doing whatever, or you've got to cover him and get him a good position in combat. It seems like those could all be things that are really going to happen inside the gameplay. Where are the blades?
Well, we can be pretty sure Kratos isn't going to be just with the axe, because even in the past God of War games, there have always been, like, in the first one, you had the Blade of Artemis and, various other alternative weapons, but you generally stuck with the Blades of Chaos because you started with them, you leveled them up throughout the game.
Except, where are the Blades of Chaos?
Yeah.
And that's slightly, as somebody who has played at least God of War 1 and 2, I never played 3, I'll totally admit that. But where are the Blades of Chaos? Am I just stuck with this axe? Where are my options? I didn't see any of that in the gameplay. I did like what I saw in the gameplay trailer where we have this shield that you take off your back and it rolls out and opens up and then you can bash people with the shield and use it offensively. That looks really cool. But is an axe, going back to gameplay, is that still as kinetic and high octane as the Blades of Chaos were?
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see on that one. I hope what we get is top notch. I mean, I don't have too many reasons to doubt the team behind God of War.
Mm-hmm.
They have delivered in the past, and I think it's worth giving them a shot. But having said that, I definitely think this is a game you want to keep an eye on. You know, it could swing either way. The combat could be the best we've ever seen, or it could be lackluster. The story could bring Kratos to new heights, or it could ruin a character that we've grown to know and love as our little ball of rage.
Little ball of rage.
So, you know, it seems like this entire game is walking a very close line, and I'd love to see them succeed, but I can't in good conscience go around saying, yeah, this is going to be the God of War game to be God of War.
Yep, I think when you remove some of the nostalgia and look at what we have, there are some concerns. I would say sage advice on this one is, you know, hopefully anticipate. I would wait for a couple reviews. I wouldn't wait for weeks on end to buy this game, but I would wait to see a couple reviews before you go out and you spend your money on it. Now, Sage and I, we're going to grab it right away when we can and try to get a review up within a week of it coming out on our Rage reviews when we get to that point, around 4/20 when it comes out.
Yep.
No jokes to be made. And we're going to have that out there for you guys as well, talking about gameplay, talking about story, what we experienced. But I would be a little cautious. I wouldn't say don't look to buy this, but I wouldn't say dive in headfirst and buy it right away.
Now, if you're a diehard God of War fan, you probably already made up your mind.
Yep.
But if you are still on the fence, I'd say give it a little bit of time. Just keep an eye on it. And after it launches, then try and make an informed decision.
Yep, that's what I would totally do. I'm excited for it, yet leery. It's got to walk that fine line, like we've said.
Yeah. So, if you like this video, be sure to let us know down in the comments your thoughts. Tell us your opinions on this new God of War. You know, what do you want to see out of it? How do you think it's going to be?
Yep. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that share button, and give us some feedback on what you're looking forward to in God of War, and maybe what you're also leery about as well.
Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you stay notified. Peace, people.